So in the Ahsoka series, in the opening scene, there's this unidentified New Republic vessel called the Vesper. Baylan Skoll and his apprentice Shin Hati completely just clear and tear apart in their attempt to break Morgan Elsbeth free from captivity. She's basically hired them to help her get Thrawn back. The arrogance of the New Republic Navy is on full display here.
I'm calling their bluff. Signal them to come aboard. I want to meet these Jedi.
Yes, they've won the war, but now they're repeating the exact mistakes that the Empire used to make, which is failing to deploy a screen of fighters to prevent an enemy landing party from getting on board and creating havoc. And this is especially stupid considering what we kind of figured out about the New Republic cruiser's role, which we'll talk about later in the video. But yeah, like this scene kind of pissed me off. I just don't like the complete lack of discipline this captain has. I don't care how peace-loving the New Republic is, you don't allow any random person pilot a craft onto your ship. What if they had a bomb? What if they had raftards? Or 50 Ewoks have been normalized to human meat and starved for a week. And seriously, the captain only brings 6 security personnel to meet this intruder, and one of the security guys is a Mon Calamari. He's literally a fish out of water man. Like, tell me how he's gonna use his flipper to articulate the trigger on a blaster pistol. Look at his hand. Look at his little flipper hand. What the hell? They even have a specially designed helmet for this guy that fits snug onto his fishy head, but they don't bother to give him a weapon that he can actually hold with his hands. Flippers. I mean, at this point, why don't they just put a fishbowl on his head and just call it a day? Because, you know, he's gonna die. He's not gonna make it out of here. And especially because Captain Genius over here makes the Mon Calamari, again with no fingers, inspect this dude who's either crazy or just some kind of supervillain based on how he's dressed. Look, the guy even puts his flipper onto his weapon, and it's clear he can't unbuckle the holster if his life depended on it. And it completely does depend on it. I also love how the only guy in the security attachment with his weapon at ready is behind everyone else and being blocked from shooting the enemies. There's a disconnect for me here. I mean, the New Republic just won a war. It was a hard-fought war, and suddenly these people have forgotten everything. Maybe these are like new recruits, but these are the type of assholes who would call Princess Leia and Wedge Antilles, all the people who actually fought and bled during the war, warmongers for wanting the New Republic to continue militarizing. Like, I love this scene with Hera Syndulla when she just hits on Kaz Yono's dad here. It's terrific.
Were you ever in the war, Senator?
No.
Just sat back and waited to see who came out on top?
Like, I really want to like the New Republic. The Rebel Alliance was really cool, and, you know, the New Republic in the last year of the war was pretty awesome. They had some new ships, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But right now, the New Republic has been neutered. And maybe it's done on purpose. I don't know. I don't know where this is going. Well, I kind of know where it's going, but it just seems a little over the top. But enough about the New Republic ship security. Let's talk about this ship, because the ship I do quite like for a lot of reasons. One, it's a sleek and clean design. It's appealing to the eyes. And two, I think whoever made this truly understands the New Republic, both aesthetically and functionally. This is completely how the New Republic would design their ships. Now, first, when I saw this ship, I thought it was a Starhawk battleship. You know, ever since the Aftermath novels came out like 6 years ago, every time I see a New Republic ship, I'm thinking Starhawk, Starhawk, Starhawk. So the Starhawk was like one of the first New Republic built capital ships, and they actually designed it during the war, and they used seized Imperial ship parts to glue it together. It was a kind of cool idea to not waste all of the parts that they were seizing after capturing Imperial shipyards. I liked it a lot. And these things were massive. They're 2,400 meters long. They dwarfed the 600-meter long Imperial-class Star Destroyer. They did have a weird design choice, though. The main weapon on board was a crazy powerful tractor beam, and I mean, it did take down the Ravager Super Star Destroyer at Jakku, which was pretty cool, but other than that, it's kind of a silly weapon unless your main job is like repoing Imperial battleships. This design actually reminds me of one of those annoying UFC fighters who immediately goes to the ground and tries to wrestle people for like no reason. Everyone wants to see someone get punched in the face, come on. And that's kind of what the Starhawk is. It didn't matter how much you wanted to run away, it was going to try to drag you in and wrestle with you, and I don't know. But yeah, pretty quickly, I realized that this wasn't the Starhawk. And upon further research, I found out that this thing is basically brand new. It was created for the Ahsoka show and this time period. So I really like this design, but how it was designed is really classic Filoni. He constantly brings back lost concept art from the original trilogy era from guys like Ralph McQuarrie. And in this case, this New Republic cruiser looks exactly like a sketch made by Joe Johnston. You could see the Imperial-class Star Destroyer up top, and this was supposed to be the Republic cruiser on the bottom, which was probably later on turned into the Mount Calamari cruiser. Okay, so from the front, this New Republic cruiser looks super friendly. Like, it could be a passenger liner for all we know. It's very round, no hard edges, no weapons and placements in sight. And this kind of fits in with the New Republic's MO. They wanted their troopers to look high-vis and professional, but not intimidating, not like those Imperial fascists. Yeah, they look more cool and serious, but it's all fun and games until they start measuring your skull and saying you're not human enough or some other kind of meth-fueled garbage ideology. And so yeah, I'll take the incompetent New Republic Blue Boys who will literally allow you to park in their state-of-the-art military vessel and walk around like a drunk tourist.
But I guess that's life, you know, like choosing the lesser evil of two terrible choices.
But yeah, where was I? These ships have to look kind of friendly. They don't want to intimidate people. They're here to maintain the peace instead of create peace, which usually involves killing people. But once you see the ship from the side and from behind, you can tell that there's something a bit hidden beneath the surface of this ship. First, let's take a look at the size of it next to a Mon Calamari cruiser, which is usually around 1,100 to 1,300 meters in length. It's pretty small. I think it's about a third of the length of the larger Mon Calamari cruiser, so I would pin its size to around 300 to 400 meters, which is basically frigate or a light cruiser size for the New Republic Navy. In our own world, that's about the size of the largest freighters or cruise ships we have in the ocean. Now, I'm actually kind of surprised that the New Republic would commission any new ships during this period, especially after you considered the fact that Mon Mothma wanted to basically demilitarize the New Republic before the war even ended. We kind of talk about this in one of our recent videos about the New Republic and how it's kind of screwed, but I guess it does kind of make sense for them to build something like this, even if they do consider the war being over. Militaries are constantly transforming to fit the mission they need to accomplish, and now that the conventional warfighting against massive Imperial battleships was over, they needed a fleet that would be more cost-efficient and actually good for peacekeeping. And the MC-80s were just too big of a concentration for resources. And they were really just a reaction to the Imperial-class Star Destroyer that the rebels had to fight. They realized that they couldn't keep running away from each battle. They had to stand and fight. But the thing is, the MC-80s were really cost-intensive. I imagine these New Republic cruisers are anywhere from a third to 1/6 the cost in production, maintenance, and crew. So you can have, 3 to 6 of these New Republic cruisers in place of one of these MC-80s. You're allowed to spread out your forces to multiple systems instead of just one. This is always my criticism of the Empire, by the way. They concentrated way too many resources in the ISD when they really should have just built more light cruisers. So this is a really good move in my opinion. The New Republic has a lot of space they have to cover. Plus, the MC-80 really was not built for war. They just weren't efficient vessels in that way. First, as you can tell when I'm giving the lengths of these ships, they come in a wide range of different lengths because each one of these vessels were customized and built into their own shape. There's just a complete lack of standardization, which makes repairs extremely difficult. Some of these vessels were built for deep space exploration, others were built as luxury liners, some were even used as civic buildings underwater. I mean, for the purpose of this war, don't get me wrong, the MC-80s were the backbone of the rebel fleet and the only reason they held out at Endor as long as they did. These ships had a redundant shield system that was revolutionary, honestly, and it made them very robust. But again, these ships were way too large and inefficient for the firepower they brought to the battle. Imagine these 400-meter New Republic cruisers are much more optimized. It's large enough to deter most pirates or bandit groups and could serve well as a command ship for a fleet of smaller New Republic vessels. But at the same time, it required a much smaller crew than the MC-80 and could basically do everything it could do. I mean, just take a look at this bridge crew. You don't need trenches full of engineers and officers. All you really need is a dozen or so people. This does give off a very Star Trek vibe, by the way. And if you look at this freeze frame just behind the bridge, you have 3 escape pods. I'm guessing there's another 3 on the other side, which brings it to a total of 6. And I think most of these escape pods in Star Wars carry anywhere from 6 to 8 people, so that's at most 36 to 48 people in the front of the ship that need to be evacuated in the case of an emergency. This ship is about the size of a Nebula B escort frigate, which is about 300 meters in length. They had a crew of around 800 people. And imagine this New Republic frigate had around the same amount of crew, with a security complement of no more than maybe 100, 150 people, which really isn't enough to stop 2 Dark Jedi, especially if they're spread all over the ship. These 2 guys were basically just walking around killing troopers in small groups of 3 and 4 the entire time. Now, you probably have another few hundred crew dedicated to maintenance and service and engineering, but I would say at least half of the ship's crew, 300 to 400 people, are dedicated to the main role of this vessel, which serves
as a carrier for fighters. Now, I've always been a huge fan of the Republic-designed Venator-class Star Destroyer, which has a massive complement of several hundred starfighters on board, including the hyperdrive-equipped ARC-170. This was a ship that could control entire sectors very easily, and I think this was a much smarter design than the ISD, which only had 6 squadrons or 72 TIE fighters on board, all of which had no hyperdrives. Basically, an ISD could only hit and attack what it could see. A Venator-class Star Destroyer could attack you from hyperspace by launching its starfighters from another system. Like I talked about before, space combat, naval combat is about not exposing your carriers or larger ships and using these smaller vessels to chip away at your enemy's defenses. It's also about dispersing your forces, putting as many weapon systems into play, ideally on small little vessels that are hard to target. I think the Imperial method and naval doctrine was just idiotic. So in comparison, this New Republic cruiser, which is about maybe a 1/6 to 1/12 the size of an Imperial-class Star Destroyer, had a pretty robust complement of fighters on board. You can clearly see at least 4 hangars here. These are very small hangar bays, probably big enough to fit maybe 1 squadron, about 12 fighters, which means that this small ship can carry up to 48 fighters. This is a complete game changer. I mean, the Rebels had less than half of that at Yavin 4 when they took down the Death Star. We can see some A-Wings and X-Wings in the background here, so these are all hyperdrive-equipped ships, and so they can really spread the presence of this one ship to nearby systems, which is why this ship is far more effective at peacekeeping. I actually like this design a lot. Yes, the extra hangar doors are structural weaknesses, but I think this isn't the New Republic's play here. They aren't expecting too many close-range, broadside exchanges. Instead, what they want is optimal in and out traffic for their squadrons of fighters on board. Having 4 hangar doors massively decreases the time of deployment and pickup of fighters, and makes it harder for enemy fighters to pin your fighters into one specific hangar. And should one of these hangars get blown up, the damage is really just limited to that hangar, which is nice. And since New Republic starships all have hyperdrives, this means that this cruiser could actually service and rearm a much larger group of fighters, with a portion of pilots just staying outside of the hangar. You can basically use this New Republic cruiser as a refueling station, which I like a lot. Another major clue that this ship is a carrier first and foremost is the large space traffic control tower on the top of the ship, which will be useful for directing traffic in and out of these 4 hangars. So this is a pretty good cost-saving design. It gives you the most bang for the buck in my opinion, but like most carriers, this New Republic cruiser is just not designed for close-range combat. It really depends on its escort fighters to do most of its fighting and defending. I mean, we don't even see any weapons emplacements on the outside of the ship. They could be, hidden inside of the hull or something, but I wouldn't be surprised if this thing were really lightly armed. It does seem like this ship has a robust amount of power with 3 main engines and 8 secondaries. Probably makes it much faster than other comparable ships in its class. And if, this New Republic cruiser is following the Mon Cala legacy of doing redundant shield systems, this should be a pretty robust ship. And so the strategy here is probably to deploy your fighters from far away, and if you do encounter larger battleships, just run away as fast as you can. And so I think this New Republic cruiser, with its blockade runner-like arrangement of engines, heavy reliance on snub fighters, really does follow the legacy of the Rebel Alliance quite well. I imagine General Jando Dana would have much rather had this New Republic cruiser than the Nebula B frigates they had to steal all the time. It's definitely more robust than the CR-90 corvettes and Hammerhead corvettes they use as well. It's really the perfect ship for hit-and-run engagements. Pop into a system, quickly deploy your fighters, and then quickly retrieve them and get out of Dodge. It's always good to see new ships appearing from this part of Star Wars history. If you guys are interested in Star Wars lore and like this video, why not give us a subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. My name is Alan, and thank you for joining us. See you next time.